And we'll be joined in a bit by Tony Modise, market analyst, via our outside broadcast facility. Leon Lowe from the Free Market Foundation on the phone. And Volshia Gekwane is the National Black Business Caucus CEO in studio. Good to have you, Gekwane. Of course, when Davos comes around, there's always the question whether we're going there with a begging bowl as South Africa with all these appetizers to say we have an investor-friendly environment, we have incentives, we have adequate skilled workers, etc. Do you think that the agenda will really be prioritized on the needs of South Africa as opposed to what investors will gain out of it?
Yes, we do go there and we say we are open for business and we need foreign direct investment and so on. What's important to the NBBC, though, is that foreign direct investment, those who come to invest in South Africa, we must start being strict on how they invest in South Africa. Just getting the investment is not good enough. We have investors already in South Africa, some of them, but we're not getting it filtering through to the person who lives in a tin shack and is using a bucket system now. We're not getting it through to the people who live in the rural areas, for example. So that investment, when they do bring it here, it must be able to reach those who really need it. We talk about job creation as a way forward, but how do we create those jobs if everything is centralized in one place? And we got a lot of shenanigans when contracts are being given out, when corporate sector is not reinvesting themselves into this economy. So we need to have proper outlined rules and regulations of how these foreign companies come to invest in South Africa.
And with Cyril Ramaphosa, Deputy President, himself being an astute businessman, he speaks the language. He has got the acumen of what business would want. Do you think that that's the conversation we ought to be having internally to encourage the private sector sitting on 1.4 trillion rand that they haven't invested, to say, you know, you're complaining about policy instability, we've given you now a new leader, etc.
Yes, I mean, that money that's sitting in the corporate sector right now, I can give you examples. Hollard is sitting with 30 billion spent per annum on just repairing the cars that they insure. 0.2% of that, this is what Hollard has told me, 0.2% of that only goes to black business. Even then, it's black business that's 25% black owned. So that 30 billion that they're spending now, they cannot even transfer it to do the enterprise development and so on and so forth. They talk about putting 400 million towards crashes for ESD. I don't understand which crash, which orphanage or whatever it is that they put that into. But 400 million could develop a lot of businesses, small businesses. That's only one company in the sector. There's many others, that I can name. But the issue is these companies are not really looking at developing the small business. So when we get these billions coming in from a foreign direct investor, where does it end up? With the same giants, with Anglo. Anglo is a foreign direct investor. They're not a local company in South Africa. But all they do when they come in, go next to any Anglo shaft, you'll see a dilapidated state. You'll see a place where people are living in tin shacks. Anglo is doing nothing to help anybody, but they've got foreign direct. So the problem, I don't know if it's foreign direct investment directly, or if it is when the money gets here, where does it end up? It ends up in the same white monopoly capital. We cannot afford that anymore. Yeah,
so you're saying that we're selling the sales pitch to lure investors, or rather, are you saying that we're not necessarily putting the terms of agreement, or we're not putting the conditions, because we have all these laws and policies and how direct foreign investment ought to, in the main, benefit the majority and change the material living conditions. But we see that the rich are getting rich and the poor divide is getting wider.
Yes, I mean, we're looking for more billions to come into the mining sector, into the financial services sector and all these, right? But the jobs, we are agreeing to 3.5 as a minimum wage in the country. So the individual worker who's supposed to support their family, whether those billions come in or they don't, it does not affect them in any way, it does not develop them in any way. We talk about jobs, and we talk about a job that's paying 3,500. Who can build a home for their children on 3,500? So those foreign direct investors, when they come in, together with the corporate sector that's here now, that's got trillions that they're not investing, they need to all look at how they're going to develop the individual South African who's struggling right now and doesn't have access to any work, any quality work.
But I mean, the nature of capitalists is that they frankly care about the bottom line, not necessarily putting people first. So, you know, if you're going to appeal to a moral conscience for business to do the right thing, as it were, to act ethically, I don't think that's the pitch that the delegation will be taking. You know, they'll be looking at the slow economic growth, the fact that we're junk status, and whether there's a recovery plan and where they can leverage the most.
Yes. I don't think it's asking for a certain change in a paradigm shift as far as their consciousness is concerned. I think it's more about an economic system that we need to look at. Because if everybody in the country is poor, who's going to buy the milling meal from that milling company, from Tiger Brands? Who's going to buy it? Who's going to buy the Rama if everybody's unemployed and poor? So they have to reinvest in their own market so the market can be developed so that they can have a bigger market. Right now they're complaining everything is shrinking, our sales are going down and all this. They're going down because people don't have money. Create the jobs, create the opportunities, just open up. If Tiger Brands decides there, they say, okay, we'll take in an area where they are, let's say in Olifantsfontein, we'll say in Tembisa, we'll take electricians to come and do the work in our buildings. That already means certain families can feed their kids, can put their kids through school.
In an ideal world, there should be that concerted effort, and I totally agree with you that more should be done. Tony Modise, market analyst, joins us via our outside broadcast facility. Leon Louw will come to you in a moment. Good evening to you, Tony, and thanks so much for joining us. WEF is with us again. What, in your view, is likely to be different? Because, you know, some have said it's only a talk shop, and there's very little that South Africa benefits from it, except that the investors would walk away with a chunk of the deal.
Well, Cindy, there's, you know, with the projections that the Treasury and also the World Bank has projected this year in terms of South African economic growth, everything is very positive, and we're starting to see that element of growth, and also the rand to the dollar price is on our favor. And the only worries right now are in terms of what might happen in February when Moody raises. So there will definitely be growth in South African economy this year. It's just a matter of channeling our energies in the right sector, pushing those right sector. Well, the mining sector just give their performance yesterday, of which it came out very positive. But the challenge was on the gold mining sector, where we're starting to see a little bit of a downward trend to them. Most of the miners are moving out of this sector. So it's just a matter of moving our channels into the right sector in terms of South African economy to steer the growth on a long-term perspective.
Okay, Tony, stay with us. Leon Louw, thank you for your patience. He's with the Free Market Foundation as the Managing Director. Leon, your view with what's likely to change now with Cyril Ramaphosa leading the delegation for the World Economic Forum in Davos, and highlighting the fact that the state-owned entities would have to be revamped and cleaned up in order to ensure foreign direct investment.
Yes, I think South Africans, I'm sorry to say, are somewhat delusional about how growth and prosperity work. The fact is nobody in Davos cares a damn about whether or not people live in shanties or have jobs or what nice houses they have. They have 200 countries in the world, all of which are trying to attract them, and they will simply go to the countries with the most inviting and enticing economic policies, and we are not one of those countries. We currently, when just heard from Tony that the outlook for growth is positive, meaning that our growth will rise from 0 to 1. Now let's understand what that means, or roughly 0 to 1. It means that the wealth of South Africans will double in a lifetime, 70 years. That is the effect of 1% growth. Had we been growing at 7%, like India and China and Mauritius and various other countries, since 1994, instead of us now having about a $4,000 to $5,000 per person wealth in South Africa, we would be one of the world's wealthiest countries at something like $25,000 to $30,000 per person. What we have to do is grow. And if you don't grow, you can do whatever you like. You can talk about how you would like people to invest and how much you
All right,
would like
does that
people to
growth, Leon, mean that less government intervention and for investors essentially to be rolled out on, you know, the red carpet rolled out for them? What does that kind of growth entail?
Well, it's really not rocket science. It's quite simple. There are various indices in the world, the Economic Freedom Index, the World Bank Doing Business Index, World Economic Forum Competitiveness Index, and others. And you simply look at them and you see that we have a low and a poor score, and our score is falling. And what you have to do is get us to rise. That means you have to privatize, you have to lower tax rates, you have to deregulate the economy, you have to, particularly, and this is very, very important for black advancement and transformation, is get rid of all the red tape and the regulations that big business love and small business can't cope with. And so you've got to liberate South Africa's economy from the constraints that suffocate it at the moment. And that is the only formula anywhere in the world that works. It always works. It never fails. And if you have the level of regulation, control, and tax that we have, it always fails. It cannot succeed. So we are doomed, unless Mr. Ramaphosa and others totally, radically transform our economic policy towards market policies, we are doomed to continued stagnation.
All right, Tony Modise, market analyst. Just very briefly before we let you go, do you agree privatization, deregulation, and all those other items, and or maybe even tax incentives or relaxation of the tax laws for investors is the way to go?
Not yet, Cindy. I think South African economy is still fragile to actually even think of having a little bit of ease when it comes to tax. We're still very fragile, hence even today that the interest rate has to be left unchanged, considering the state of the current economy right now. So what needs to happen is we cannot even change regulations. Regulations are measures that secures the business sector in the South African economy. They need to be strengthened and they need to be managed well. What needs to happen is people just need to be managed well to steer them into terms of getting into these sectors and be able to compete in the corporate sector as well, whereby they won't be having challenges as we've been having challenges for a couple of years. The most important thing is this year we are very, I'm one of the traders as well that is very positive about the South African economy this year, and the Davos meeting next week. Cyril Ramaphosa, he's been in the business sector. He's been attending those meetings for years. So he knows who to talk to and who knows what to say because he's been in the sector. So growth is quite positive this year, really.
All right, Tony Modise, thank you so much. We'll wrap it up in studio. Volshare Kwane, who is the National Black Business Caucus CEO, increasingly even more difficult because we are a developmental state that does need to almost be biased towards the emerging markets and particularly black industrialists and trying to liberate the economy, if you will. But this is not what the Davos is all about. This is really about where the big players, the high echelons of power will be mingling and hobnobbing.
Yes, Davos is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. I think it's a great thing, and I think Ramaphosa will do a great job there. The issue I have is we do get the foreign direct investment coming in, and it ends up just building up that same pot that's already big and does not filter through. So the gentleman before said I'm delusional because I'm thinking that economy is based on who lives where. The issue is we deal with communities and we see where the communities live. He doesn't go to them. He sits in an air-conditioned office and he says that that's irrelevant. But it's so linked to the economy. I cannot buy bricks from a brick-making company to build a house if I don't have a job. So that individual who needs the job, the companies that can invest, who've got money here in South Africa, our money, our buying power as Africans, as black people, they are not putting that money back into the economy, and therefore jobs are not being created. They need to change that. If they are serious about developing the economy, to a higher rate. We need to get more people employed, more people active in mainstream economy. I don't know if that's a delusion, but I think that's what needs to happen in South Africa.
But I think part of that would also need to deal with policy reform, and those are part of the radical economic transformation policies that were spoken about in the red tape, that even it's difficult generally to do business in Africa or South Africa specifically,
No.
but even much more so for the emerging developer.
But Cindy, legislation is there, policies are there. The problem is people find ways to shortcut the policies. Big companies build a trust, and they put a couple of black people in a trust, and they say it's 25% black owned, so they can qualify for BEE. So they do everything in their power to limit the transformation. That's what has to change. We need to monitor how we say the transformation should happen.
Okay, we'll leave it there, Volsheer. As always, much appreciated. Volsheer Gekwane is the National Black Business Caucus CEO, joining us in the studio. Still on